In this video, we will continue designing our mobile app for cookbooks using Figma. We will also add prototype interactions to our app. We will also learn how to use auto layout and components in Figma. You can find the link to the Figma community file in the description down below if you want to follow along. Also, if you're interested to watch the part 1 of the cookbook app, you can find the link in the comments down below as well. Let's get started. So in part 1, we managed to design this, and the only thing that we need to design is the overlay. We already have the icons added to our icon libraries, and if I click on the components, here we do see the components that we created. So what we need to do is basically copy this and visit the final designs. Here the overlay doesn't need to be in an entire frame, so what we need to do is basically create an overlay, and on the prototype when we click that, it actually pops up, and automatically using the Figma prototype we would make the background darker. So let's just go ahead and paste the button here, and what we see here, the button plus doesn't have a label. So in the previous video we managed to use component properties to remove the label. So if we go ahead and click hide the label, this basically will make the label hidden for us, and the only text that we need to add here is save in a new cookbook. So we have our text added, so we would just highlight both of them, shift and A to create an auto layout, and we would duplicate this to the bottom. And for the bottom one, we need to swap this with a heart icon and change the background. So in this example, if I click on the icons, I have the ability to change it to the heart icon, and I can make it rounded in this example, but here we have another color. And our button right now doesn't have another variant. So let's see how we can add another variant to our button. We can click on, basically go to the instance, and if we drag our profile to the other side, all we have to do is click the plus, which is the property, variant, and then give it theme in this example. So for the first one, we can just call this like a white theme. So if we just type in white, that would be the first theme. So we would hold option and duplicate this, and then for this one we can call this orange theme. And for the orange theme, if I click outside in the canvas, we already added these colors in the previous video. So if I take a look at the primary, we have 96 and 60. So all I have to do is basically go ahead and swap the gray 30 to primary 60 and the background color to primary 96. By doing that, I now managed to create a second variant. So if I go to the final design, now I do see that this is an orange theme. So if I basically select the buttons and scroll to the properties panel on the right side, here I have the theme, which is white. I can now swap it to orange. The only difference between this auto layout and the auto layout to the top is another layer of auto layout nested. So this one is basically a single line of auto layout. However, the other one, if I try to draw a square here, we have our first element, which is one auto layout. We have the two elements here. Let's just draw the boxes. This is another auto layout. We have our checkbox, and then if I copy this one more time, also let me make these transparent, the gray boxes. So if I make them transparent, here we see that we have the other auto layout, which is pointing from top to bottom. So what we need to do is add the text, the recipe, and another checkbox at the right side. So this is one auto layout we have on the left hand side. What we need to do is shift and A to create another auto layout, and then in this auto layout the direction is from basically left to right. We need to change it from top to bottom, duplicate this, and then change and update the text so it matches basically the text that we have. Since we managed to add that, what we need to do is select the nested auto layout, make sure that it is aligned to the left side. But what you notice is the text is not being aligned to the left, so we need to select the nested text and make sure the text is aligned to the left side. Also, what we need to do is, let's just zoom out a little bit, we need to add a frame around this one. So our iPhone 16 mobile app is 440, so let's just go ahead and add a 440 pixel frame around this one to basically create the overlay effect. And then here we have these rounded corners. So let's just go ahead, click the appearance, and then give them like 16 and 16 on the top left and top right to create the rounded corners. What you notice is the text is hidden. So what we need to do is select the nested text and make sure to give them a gray color. In this example, I would go with gray 20. Also for the first one, I would make it bold a little bit, and I would increase the font size to 14. Second one, I'll make it bold, increase the font size to 14. 14. The other one, I'll leave it as basically 12 and regular, and I would decrease the lightness. This way we have again more contrast between the top element and the bottom element. Let's delete the boxes that we created around our image example, and what we need to do is add a checkbox. So if I take a look at my auto layout, here we have our frame 4. So what we can do is call this overlay, and then the overlay is a single frame, so we need to turn that into an auto layout. I'm making sure the auto layout is from top to bottom. Let's just give it a padding of 24 in all directions, and the space between them, let's just keep it as 24. What we need to do is these auto layouts inside, they need to be basically set to fill. So if I select both of them, let's call both of them div or row, and we navigate to the width and making sure that they are set to fill. Also, what we need to do is select the text within all the auto layouts and make sure that they are set to fill as well and they're left aligned. However, what you notice is the first one is fixed, so if I try to make this smaller or larger, it is working. However, the second one is not, because we are nesting another auto layout, because this is a complex layout. What we need to do is basically rename this to div and make sure that this is fill, and also adjust the spacing. We can go with 4 in this example. So let's just go ahead and add the checkbox. We already have the checkbox in the icons, so what I would do is I would just copy the checkbox, select the other frame, paste it. We are not able to see it, so let's just go ahead and select the gray. Now you see that the checkbox is added, and the reason we made that auto layout, if I select the second frame, you see the auto layout. If I remove the auto layout, the whole layout is basically ruined. So I'm going to Command Z. The only reason we grouped the nested auto layout is to prevent this behavior. So we have a parent auto layout that wraps everything, and then we have the nested auto layout, which basically groups the title and the description, and then we have the checkbox, which is pushed all the way to the right side. The other thing that we need is the save button. So if I go and visit my components, we have the button, which is these two buttons with icon, and we don't want that. We want to create a brand new component, which is save in this example. And creating a button component is very easy. We already have the color for it. So what we need to do is visit here. We can rename this to icon button, and then just add a text, call this save, Shift and A auto layout, add a secondary color, make sure the text is set to white, and then in terms of the appearance, which is rounded corner, let's go ahead and make it basically all the way rounded. For the padding, we can give it 16 all around and reduce the top and bottom from 16 to 8. So this way we have like a pill-shaped button. We can rename this to button and create a component out of this one. If I drag this out, now we have the instance. So if I try to drag the instance, we have our button created. So I'm going to cut the instance, go to the final design. We have the overlay. I'm going to basically paste it here and then click on the auto layout section, make sure it's set to fill, and I have my overlay created. What we need to do is drag the overlay, make it a bit larger, and create a prototype. If I bring the overlay here, if I go to the prototype section, now it tells me to select the device. So in this example, I would search for iPhone 16 Pro Max. So as soon as I select that, it makes sure that the dimension is aligned to my actual mobile prototype. And the call to action for this one is the favorite icon. So here I would click the favorite icon, drag it all the way to the overlay, and here on tab, I don't want to navigate to. That is really important, because if I leave it as navigate to, it's not going to work. What we can do is we can do a quick preview. Here on our quick preview, if I now click this one, you see it basically navigates to the other frame for me, and that's not the behavior that I want. So instead of navigate to, I want to make sure to go with open overlay. So if I go to open overlay, if I now refresh and click this one, I have my overlay created for me. Now you see the issue is the overlay is created, but it is centered and the background is not dark. Figma has this built-in option, which is very nice, which is background. If I immediately click that, you see the background is set to dark. So I can increase the darkness to 50%, which is really good. And now I can click outside basically to close the overlay. Here, if I click outside my prototype, I close the overlay. If I actually click on the icon, it opens the overlay. Now we need to position this at the bottom. Let's just go ahead and position this at bottom center. So when we select bottom center, you see the overlay appears for me, and what we need to do is add the final animation to it. Instead of the animation being instant, we want this to be moved, and not from the left to right. We want this to be moved from basically bottom to top. So now if I click outside and click this, you see we have a very nice animation sliding upwards. The only final touch is increasing the width of our overlay. If I click our overlay, even though the width of this is 440, for some reason we made the width of our overlay 410, so we need to just fix that and increase it back to 440. So once we fix the width, we can now click back again in our iPhone 16 Pro Max, click on the favorite icon. Now you see we have a very smooth animation showing. If we click outside, our animation goes away. If we want to take this one step further, we can close our prototype in this example, and here you see that we have the first one created, and if we click the plus one, we have another section added for us. This interaction helps you to create another cookbook. So the flow, the way it works is we would click the plus and it would immediately create another recipe for us, but the recipes would be 0 because we're creating a brand new recipe. So what we do is duplicate the overlay. So we would click and duplicate it on the right side, and we would select this one, Command and D to duplicate that, and then instead of my favorite recipes, let's go ahead and rename this to chicken. Once we rename this to chicken, what we need to do is completely detach the icon button, because we no longer want to use a button icon, we want to use an image instead. So what we need to do is search for detach the instance, and make sure we delete all the nested auto layouts inside. So as soon as we delete that, we have basically an empty frame. Here we are not able to see anything because this is an empty frame. If I add a fill to it and make it basically black, now we're able to see the frame. So what I can do is make the rounded corners the same as buttons at the top. So here we have 8. What we need to do is make sure this is 8, and we use a plugin in this example called Unsplash, and in Unsplash we try to search for chicken, and in this example let's go ahead with this chicken image. If I click that, you see the chicken is updated for us, and we close this. So if I try to now zoom out, click the preview, we have the interaction created. So I click on my favorite icon, now you see that the overlay shows at the top. Now we need to add a secondary interaction, which is clicking the plus would add basically another recipe for us. The way we would do that is we would highlight over the save in a new cookbook and go back to the prototype mode, click and drag this to the other overlay, and instead of on tab going to navigate to, we would select on tab and go to swap overlay, and the swap overlay would swap this whole entire overlay for you. If we keep the move in, it would look weird. So if I go ahead and click that and click this one and click plus, you see another overlay appears. Again, this is the behavior if you want to go with, it's okay, but usually if you add a plus, you don't want another overlay to show, you want your overlay to instantly swap. So in this example, we would select the noodle, and from the animation we reset it back to instant because we don't want another overlay to show on top of the overlay. So here, if I go back again to iPhone 16, click the favorite, we have our overlay showing. Now if I click on save, we have basically our overlay being updated with the chicken, and if I click outside, you see the overlay is closed. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more design tips and tutorials, and let me know what you think in the comments down below.